The Tittabawassee watershed is located in the center of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. Its drainage area falls within the jurisdictional boundaries of 10 different counties, channeling their surface waters via the Tittabawassee River to the Saginaw River just upstream of its mouth into Lake Huron's Saginaw Bay. Starting in the mid-19th century with logging, industrial activities have wrought devastating physical impacts upon the territory even in recent memory. Dow Chemical Company, headquartered in Midland, began producing chemical products in the 1890s. Over time, Dow's operations released dioxins into the Tittabawassee River, contaminating water and sediment downstream, leading to Saginaw Bay's designation as a Superfund site. In May 2020, this same segment of the river was dealt a further blow when the Edenville and Sanford dams collapsed, causing a torrential surge that crested up to 38 feet in Midland and its surroundings. Flooding compromised Dow's containment ponds adjacent to the river, complicating the completion of a 13-year remediation effort overseen by the EPA and Eagle. The Four Lakes Restoration Project was initiated to refill Wixom and Sanford lakes, but progress raising water levels has stalled amid legal challenges. In the meantime, the Tittabawassee River has returned, more or less, to its pre-dam form. At this moment of post-disaster impasse, it is clear that the status quo for water flow, waterfront property, and regional water management systems is not working. Dams harm ecological systems and carry the risk of failure. Private property interests neglect collective stewardship commitments, and when something goes wrong, impacted residents shoulder disproportionate burdens. To date, as is typical in the U.S., fragmented regional governance has failed to unify management of watershed-scale systems. As climate change causes growing concerns about warming water temperatures and threats to water quality, the 2020 disruptions offer a rare window of opportunity to rethink normative socio-hydrological systems. Otherwise, we're just resetting the timer for the region's next big catastrophe. This moment demands a reconceptualization of common obligations. We assent to a unified right to riparian kinship, extending social relations and burdens between humans to ecological entities as well. Therefore, new socioeconomic frameworks that shape public and private decision-making must reinforce a dynamic that ensures when humans thrive or languish, non-humans do as well, and vice versa. Short of embarking on an amendment ratification campaign, perhaps a lever acting upon our existing market landscape could shift motives to align with riparian kinship. How better to express kinship than with a bond? Municipal bonds are securities issued by local governments to fund capital projects. The principal loan is repaid by the issuer on or by the bond's maturity date. Until then, the bondholder receives regular interest payments or coupons, which are typically fixed rate or tied to money market reference rates. We propose an alternative mechanism: riparian kinship bonds, or RKBs, issuable by any county in the U.S. The RKB coupon rate is variable or floating, tied to riparian kinship indicators, or RKIs, calculated at the county level nationwide. To quantify riparian kinship, the indicators benchmark 3 criteria: territorial collaboration, water health, and climate resilience. Real-time monitoring of RKIs feeds algorithms that determine each county score in a riparian kinship impact index. Counties earn index score multiplier bonuses for implementing capital projects funded by RKBs that target the 3 riparian kinship indicators. Higher index scores for a county yield higher earnings for its creditors. Riparian kinship bonds can also be traded in secondary markets, extending kinship to investors anywhere in the world. Whether bondholders are motivated by environmental altruism or personal enrichment, their participation bolsters public confidence in a market system that rewards socio-ecological kinship rather than utility maximizing extraction. In order for counties to make higher coupon rate payments to their bondholders, they must translate the public's perceived value of riparian kinship in the bond market to its perceived value in private real estate. Smart urban design must help convince property owners of such value in order for counties to capture increased tax revenue to pay their creditors. To that end, what RKB-funded projects might counties within the Tittabawassee watershed pursue as facilitators of this new arrangement?
Upstream in the small city of Clare, the Tobacco River's south branch transitions from a cold to warm water stream. Cold water streams are critical habitats for vulnerable populations of trout and sculpin. Cold water transition zones have been shifting upstream due to the impacts of climate change and increased stormwater runoff from surrounding land uses. Clare's dam at Lake Shamrock contributes to higher water temperatures that are pushing the transition zone upstream. The still water segment of the river can host floating ecological beds that lower water temperature by decreasing exposure to sunlight. The vegetated platforms provides a habitat for plant roots and microbial communities, which helps uptake pollutants and nutrients, improving water quality and preventing harmful algae blooms. Riparian easements along waterfront properties allow for greenway networks, enhancing access to active recreation. Property owners are compensated fair market value for the easements with riparian kinship bonds. Clusters of 3 or more adjacent neighbors can collectively choose to opt out of easement applications, purchasing enough bonds to fund interventions within the footprint of the river. Their segments of the greenway can be built between the floating beds with bridge connections looping back to the easement's alignment greenways. These interventions can improve Clare County's Riparian Kinship impact score, increasing bond yields for the compensated property owners. They could choose to sell Clare County bonds at a profit in secondary markets or hold on to them, anticipating further county actions that would raise its score further.
Midstream. Along the former shoreline of Sanford Lake, property owners within a special tax assessment district are required to pay for rebuilding the collapsed dam to restore their lost water access and property values. However, after years of reconnecting the river's riparian ecosystems, redamming it would once again fragment these habitats. Partial damming offers an opportunity to balance human interests with ecological resilience. Fixed crest dams elevate water levels above the river's natural path, though not as high as pre-dam failure levels. Earthworks shape fluvial ponds, partially restoring waterfront access for some properties. Native trees planted along the shores would help create thermal refugia for fish, which can navigate the dams through specialized passages designed to block invasive lampreys. The remaining exposed lakebed is rewilded with engineered wetlands. Additional ecological floating beds enhance pollution sequestration capacity, while nature trails and fishing piers enrich the human experience. In place of a tax assessment district, an RKB assessment district offers property owners riparian kinship bonds equal to the amount they are assessed. Adjacent neighbors can also choose to collaboratively purchase additional RKBs to fund specific preferred types of interventions adjacent to their properties, including up to directing earthworks to have the fluvial ponds reach their backyards. All of these interventions improve Midland County's index score, increasing RKB yields for the compensated property owners. Downstream. As water reaches Midland, upstream water quality improvements risk being undone by the Dow chemical plant's opaquely monitored effluent releases and susceptibility to flooding. To address this, the validation moat offers a bold solution. Surrounding Dow's brine and cooling ponds, the moat would channel industrial effluent for testing before reaching the river. If contamination levels are acceptable, the water would be released. Otherwise, a valve would redirect it back to Dow's ponds for treatment. Transparent real-time water quality data would be displayed on dashboards along a public greenway, fostering community trust and accountability. The moat would occupy floodplain easements around the ponds, with industrial landowners like Dow compensated through industrial riparian kinship bonds, IRKBs. IRKBs work the same as RKBs, except they have an additional score multiplier tied to real-time site-specific contamination monitoring that runs throughout the lifespan of the bond. Reducing effluent contamination increases the issuing county's index score and thus the compensated industrial property owners' yields. But reselling IRKBs in secondary markets in order to resume polluting would be very difficult, since the linked monitoring multiplier decreases their appeal to investors. Further downstream, the verification sponge acts as a final safeguard against contamination leaving the watershed. Increased precipitation and runoff introduce non-point source pollution, which the sponge addresses through a floodable park. This park would hold and filter floodwaters before they reach the Saginaw River and Bay, while serving as a recreational space with nature trails for Saginaw residents during dry periods. Developing the park requires floodplain easements and in some cases acquiring undeveloped properties. Property owners would be compensated with riparian kinship bonds, benefiting from high yields after implementation. Unlike upstream measures, this intervention does not allow for an opt-out mechanism.
Riparian Kinship shifts our current non-cooperative regional water management paradigm towards a prototype predicated on governmental, neighborly, and socio-ecological cooperation. It explores financial and real property mechanisms that may compel human behaviors to such ends. In the U.S., acting in one's own self-interest has long been the surest way to financially benefit from private property ownership. In this proposed alternative framework, the stronger the territorial reparation kinship dynamic, the more those with financial ties to the land stands to gain. Viewed through a critical infrastructure and network urbanism lens, the current state of the Tittabawassee watershed offers a cautionary tale of inflexibility in permanence. Given the opportunity afforded by systems ceasing to be permanent, we caution the new system we propose must avoid becoming another static reality and ultimately market-driven status quo. Thus, we must refine the right to riparian kinship as a bond rooted unequivocally in responsiveness.